Mal, thank you very much for just giving me your time. I know that you are very busy. So this video is about the video game day celebration of the indie dev community. That's what I want to talk about today.
Yeah.
Through making Heart of Neon, I've come to appreciate that the indie dev community is one, massive, and two, largely invisible. Partly because of the numbers, but people are going to make games because that is how they express themselves. It's what they want to do. It's where the passion lies. And what I want to talk to you today about is how can indie devs help themselves by helping others. I understand that you are instrumental in creating an indie dev collective. Can you talk to me about that, please?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think you say instrumental, but I think I'm one small piece, and there's lots of small pieces in that as the power of collective thinking and collective enterprise. But yeah, I've been making games for over a decade now in Scotland, and I started in the more traditional space of being an employee of various startups or small companies. And I've been working in Scotland and Dundee in particular, which has a heritage of games development that goes back to DMA design and Lemmings and Grand Theft Auto. So there's a great bedrock here of games development, which means there's lots of jobs and opportunity, which is wonderful. But in the decade that I've worked in making games in Scotland, I've come to appreciate that if you want to be a bit more creative, take creative risk in particular, be experimental, have a go at doing things in new ways. You need different business models essentially, because most startups are they're seeking investment, so taking risk is quite challenging. And I found that working in a collective means you can take small calculated risks and actually be quite sustainable. About 2015 now, so nearly 10 years ago, I was a co-founder of a collective that is now known as Biome Collective. And we chose that name because of the connotations of having an ecosystem that we wanted to kind of build around ourselves. And there was just a few of us. There was two of us to start off with who wanted to just try things differently. We didn't have a name. There was no official name. We didn't have a company structure at the time. And we for the first 12 months, we continued that way, but we attracted 3 additional members of the collective. And so we got some grant funding, which meant that we had to incorporate as a business structure, which means we had to pick a name. So we went with the name Biome Collective.
Before we get too far, I mean, can you just maybe talk about what did it look like, or what were you actually doing? There's 2 of you, and then like 3 more, and like what's an average week or month for that collective? What happens?
Yeah, of course. So I think at the early days, it was lots of questioning and wondering what to do. But I think because both myself and my fellow co-founder Tom, because we come from the games industry, so we already had various contacts and work projects going on. So we carried on doing small scale work. But actually what was interesting is that we were starting to draw the attention of people outside games who wanted to work with games developers, probably people from the art world, from the design world. And most people in games, they're in the silo. There's such a strong silo mentality, which is needed because you're working with technology. It's a lot of hard work. And so you have very little time to look outside what's happening around you. Whereas we purposefully wanted to operate in a way that was more open to a diverse range of people. So actually in that first 12 months of operating as a collective, we were collaborating with Scottish Dance Theatre, which is our national dance organisation in Scotland, who wanted to learn about games. So we were doing cool workshops with them and jamming ideas, etc. We also got we started an international commission with, at the time, Joseph Delap, who's a contemporary artist from America, who wanted to make a games about drone warfare. So we were attracting people who were not necessarily within the world of games, but who were intrigued by games and wanted someone to speak to. And thankfully, we were available. So that first year was just doing quite experimental projects, side projects, and in over time, month to month, the kind of word spread. People heard about us, and we attracted lots of interesting people. And I would say that Biome Collective has generally attracted people who kind of maybe don't fit in the games industry, have kind of sought out community or people who are a bit more open minded to who they are, what they want to do, and more broadly speaking, in terms of inclusion and representation. I've always been a strong advocate of encouraging people to express themselves in different ways as well, in terms of their creative process and their creative output. So, what is a game? How do you define what a game is? Does it have to be on a particular machine or using a particular set of technologies? Can it just be play? Can it just be interaction? So, because of that, we've over that time we've attracted lots of interesting people who wanted to experiment with games, and actually quite often people with vast experience from the games industry. People who worked in AAA, who've been around the block, shall we say, a few times, and thought, I want to try something a bit different. So that was the kind of foundation of Biome Collective. And then, from now till then, we've probably attracted, at the moment, we're about 30 individual members. And there's probably been about 50 members in that time, because people come and go sort of thing. So I think we've had quite an impact in terms of a community. And that's the core functionality of it, I would say. That even though we're a creative studio making games as Biome Collective, doing cool stuff in the indie space, but better yet, or more importantly than that, is that there's kind of bedrock of community. So people come share ideas. We have weekly sharing meetings, and people like do face-to-face meetings as well as online gatherings, etc. And it's very open in terms of someone might be making a brand new. Just the past few weeks, someone's made a jammed a game, and maybe thinking about pitching it to for a publisher to go and switch, or there's been this regular update of someone growing their tomatoes at home. So we have quite a diverse mix of people just sharing in the kind of broadest sense possible, which is kind of taking the pressure off the kind of sometimes in very professional settings we can almost we squeeze the creativity out of the room. Whereas we try and flip that and be very open, welcoming, and inclusive of anyone and their ideas too. So that's been very nice, very rewarding as as an individual trying to make games, to be surrounded by peers who are like-minded, who want to experiment, and also look after each other, with support and kindness.
So, I mean, even as a non-developer myself, I'm curious. How do you join? It sounds like a wonderful supportive environment, right? So anybody watching this is going to want to know how. Is it even possible, right? I mean, is there a maximum size for your collective? Is there? I mean, if somebody wanted to join, what would they do, and what are the criteria?
Yeah, it's a good question. So whenever we set up, we've never advertised for membership. It's always been like word of mouth. And the first, I say, 5 years of existing as a collective, we were centered around a co-working space in Dundee, the city. So that was a natural requirement that you're in the city and maybe you're interested in a co-working space. However, since the pandemic, we've actually lost that space, and we've operated primarily as an online community. And with that being said, we had people join us from across Scotland, Glasgow, Edinburgh. We had someone in Germany join us. We had someone more recently, someone from Birmingham. So UK based mostly, but it's expanded. The network has been expanded. But broadly speaking, we don't seek membership. We're not here to grow the membership. If there are people out there who are interested in Biome Collective, they can get in touch. We can have a conversation, see if it works for them and us, etc. But it's a kind of a community. And what I would say, especially because this is we're going out to kind of a global audience, is that Biome Collective isn't the only answer. There's collectives, I think, is an answer that could be adopted in a variety of settings, where they're geographical kind of locations or peer networks, whatever it might be. I think you should definitely set up a collective for sure. I think it's a fun thing to do, especially if you're interested in community and creativity. And I'm always happy to kind of speak to people about that. Whether people want to join Biome Collective or set up their own collective of sorts, I'm always happy to chat to people about that.
I mean, that is so. I've no doubt said this a million times, but I was radicalized by the Brendan Keogh's Australian video game professor. He wrote a book called "The Video Game Industry Does Not Exist," and it speaks to what you're talking about, how people who are not commercially focused still want to develop games, and there is sort of like a barrier because people need to eat, right? So collectives are one way of being able to sustain like a creative outlet. And while Brendan doesn't have any answers in the book, which is fair enough because it's a survey, it does speak to local collectivism, right? I mean, it would be nice in a country like America, which does not have any real arts grant system. I mean, there used to be one, and it sort of exists, but the gatekeepers are picky. So to have like different communities, especially in rural America, where like they already exist in cities, right? But
Yeah, yeah.
what would you say to someone who wanted to say in the middle of Idaho, they wanted to set up a collective? What would be the one thing or the couple of pieces of key advice that you would give to somebody who wants to start a collective?
Yeah, well, firstly, it can be done. I think, in a way, a collective. The power of setting up a collective is that it's you responding to your own reality, wherever that might be, right? So for us, we're a very small city, and as I mentioned, there's a bedrock of game developers, and there's a great institution called Abate, which is creating graduates everywhere. So there's plenty of talent for us to kind of dip into and offer that community to. However, in rural areas, there's still a need for games makers to survive and be sustainable and thrive. And I would say, firstly, what you'd have to do is just analyze your environment. Who are you? What do you want to do? And what's around you, right? If it's a small town in the middle of nowhere, well, you can still do it. You can still make a start, right? And better yet, connect to people online, right? As long as you have the infrastructure to do that, it's actually can reap tremendous creative benefits to collaborate with people who are out with your physical bubble, right? To get some interesting ideas, tap into interesting, audiences, etc. But more than anything, I would say there is just something about meeting people who share your passion and sharing your art, your work, right? So I think a lot of in that first year of Biome Collective, most people didn't know what it was. And so what we would do is we would do sharing evenings. So we'd invite people to have a bit of food together, maybe drinks or coffee, whatever it might be. Keep it social, but also just share what you're doing. You might be prototyping something. You might create a piece of music for a game, or you're designing an environment or a character, whatever it might be. Share your work, and what's really important is you share your work in progress, your rough sketches, your drafts, your early prototypes. By doing that, you really enable people to understand you, and that sense of generosity and sharing goes both ways. Then people will likewise then share with you. I think that's a great way to start really strong connections with individuals that could potentially be the foundations of a collective.
That's excellent advice. I was actually part of like a filmmaking collective like that in Brooklyn. It's very much the same idea, showing works in
Awesome.
progress, being supportive.
And on that point, I think, we're not doing anything. We're not reinventing the wheel. Collectives are an established way of doing things in the art world and the film world. Like, creative people have been experimenting with business models and stuff for a long time. And, that was some of our inspirations, from the world of art and design, even within games. I think that the guys in Toronto, Bento Miso, and there's a whole bunch of people doing stuff similar to us in the space. And even there's festival programs like the Maze Festival in Berlin or INDIEDEV. So there are these kind of programs or collectives of ideas and people trying to share more creative work that isn't always commercial. I think things can be commercial. You just have to find the right audience, and sometimes that's the challenge, is how you connect to your audience. And I actually think that more experimental work, it needs space to exist to be able to inspire people that will ultimately end up being commercial work, whether it's that project or maybe 10 projects down the road. You need people to be creative, to really express themselves and push the medium forward.
I mean, absolutely. I think games can be anything, which is one of the things advocate strongly. It's just that it's certainly here. I don't know what it's like in the UK per se, but in America, it's like it's opening weekend madness, right? If you don't break big, then why did you bother?
Yeah,
Tends to be the thing, and it's demoralizing, and you don't get a lot of support when you do something small that you feel is important. It's partly why I want to speak to people like you and remind people that collectives exist. Is that these things that exist in other forums and other disciplines, people just assume it doesn't apply to games because games is seen as such a commercial discipline, right?
yeah,
Call of
yeah.
Duty. Why would you make a small game when Call of Duty exists?
Absolutely,
And
it is
that, and that's an
behemoth.
and it's an
It is
audience attitude more than it is a creator attitude. The creators know. I'm hoping to
absolutely,
open some minds and let joy in, right?
absolutely.
I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but so the Biome Collective, is there a place where people can see what your members are doing? Is there a website, or do you have an open public exhibition at any point?
So we have biomecollective.com as our website. It's quite old, but and actually we do post on Twitter occasionally. We do weekly sharings. We share what our community's been sharing on a weekly basis. So you can see us on social media. But also we also co-produce the Arcadia Festival where we exhibit games and showcase other people's work, to be honest, not just our own. So there's a variety of ways. Probably the website is the best way to contact us to get in touch. And yeah, we'd love to talk if you want to, if you're interested or want to find out about this kind of space. So just collective action and collective making. Just reach out. Happy to chat.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Continue the good work. It's very exciting. Thank you.
Likewise, Paul. Thank you so much. Thank you.